Too much of it, too little of it can lead to issues and problems. And generally, most people overwater. And that leads to other issues in the plant. It makes them weaker to disease. But one of the things I was thinking of, a lot of the times, I know we talked about it before, but chlorosis happens to certain... I remember seeing them in... shiz, what are they called? Anyway, it was getting too much water. It was a little shrub. Can't remember what it's called. But it usually...
spireas.
Spireas.
Yeah.
That was what... It was just getting too much water. And I've only seen it at Marinda. That was what we had the worst problem with chlorotic shrubs. And I think it was because of the water.
Yeah.
Because we watered the crap out of everything.
Which would then leach all of the nutrients. And even if you did put down more amendments, more fertilizer, it would simply just leach that all the way through the soil profile. The plant roots can't get at it. Your leaves turn yellow.
Right.
And more than likely scorch. So yeah, good point. Too much water, chlorosis.
Well, and what I find fascinating too is like almost the same signs of stress, and we'll go with a tree. In both, too much and too little are very similar to the same sign. So it's not looking like it's the leaves is starting to defoliate. The leaves are starting to get yellow.
They're wilting.
Right, wilting and just...
It's a good sign of lack of water and then also overwater.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting how too much of it is the same symptoms as too little of it. I thought that was kind of interesting.
A little bit of trickery there. That,
yeah.
Nature is throwing a curveball at us.
But that also is plant specific, if it's too much or too little of water. Because what might be too much water for a tree would not be too much water for grass. Which we kind of try to separate your watering cycles depending on the plants you have. So that way you can have them on a different schedule. So you don't want to be watering as much in your shrub beds as you are in your grass beds, which we've talked about that too. So maybe this is just an overall review of all the other stuff that we've talked about. But yeah, watering is extremely plant specific, which also this kind of goes into the next one that I was bringing up. How much to water or not to water depends on your soil. So soil is another big problem where we're trying to put plants in the wrong kind. Well, I shouldn't say wrong kind of soil, but what it's not used to. And we kind of use words like tolerates and prefers. So most plants prefer well-drained soil. Like it always says in the description of the plant, prefers well-drained soil. What we deal with a lot is clay soils, and it will tolerate clay soils. Nothing really prefers clay soils. So what you really want in a soil is a loam. Everyone, what's a loam? So that's kind of a mixture of the two. It is both, has the good qualities of a clay and the good qualities of a sand. And we've talked about soil too. And how clay has those minerals and nutrients in it and is able to hold on to water, where sand doesn't hold on to the nutrients, but plants prefer a well-drained soil. So it's a give and take.
Very good, yeah. Soil is definitely, with soil you have pH issues. We've talked about that in the past, but that also creates, in some varieties, not everything, a few varieties, it creates an environment where the roots cannot uptake certain minerals and like say iron and magnesium, and even, well, anyway, yeah, so just certain nutrients. It makes it much more difficult for the plant to be able to use, and then without that, you get this yellowing effect in the leaves. And so, and actually sometimes on the flip side, if there are too much nutrients, micronutrients, it can create a toxicity environment. Usually that's not a pH issue, but since we're on the topic of soil, some soils can hold on to nutrients much better, such as clay, and can create a toxic environment for your plants. And so what shows up there, so instead of yellowing, you're going to get like these black spots on the leaves. And quite often those are that, and margin burn of the leaves, and that's going to be a toxicity problem. So it's interesting how when there's an issue with your soil, it shows up in the leaves. And so anyway, yeah, I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's the leaves are a great indicator of what it's being uptaked, and it can give you clues onto what needs to be added or taken away in both of those. Well, even in sun exposure too, it looks a lot like not enough water or too little water, because too much exposure sucking out the water of the plant and making it look like it needs more water, or not enough, it dies too. Like my cousin planted great shrub, love it, the 9-bark, and it's a smaller variety. I'm not exactly sure which one, but it was on the north side, so it wasn't getting any exposure. And it had a drip line to it. And I'm like, well, this can handle full sun. This shrub. Because I was talking to him. He's like, I don't know why this thing died. I'm like, it's not dead yet. You can still see some green on it. We'll just have to prune it down, and maybe we can get it back, start it over. But it's just going to take so much of its energy resources to do that. But it totally died for what we could see, and he has 3 other ones right there that are looking gorgeous, but this one on the end, like, who knows? It could have been a couple different things, but that's what kind of got me thinking about this topic was that his shrub, and I think it was more of a not enough exposure, probably overwatering, and then because it can handle our pH, it's a native. And then it can handle clay. Doesn't love clay, but it can handle clay. So it doesn't look like it's being attacked by any sort of pest or creature or whatever. It's in the backyard, so it's not being fed on by deer or whatever that are grazing on it in the neighborhood. So I think it was more of an exposure thing.
Yeah. One of the things that we use in the greenhouse when we come across a plant in large groupings, we come across a plant that it's looking sick. The very first thing we do is check the roots. Flip that plant upside down, look at the roots. And so in the case of this 9-bark, I was thinking, one of the first things that I would do as a diagnostic plan is, especially if it's dead or dying already, I would simply just unpot it or just dig it up and look at the roots. And by doing so, that type of, it doesn't kill the plant. So if you were to dig it up and you notice that the roots are all nice and white and fluffy and all the feeder roots are super healthy, no big deal. Go ahead and plant it back. Move it maybe to a different location and plant it and see how well it does. But if the roots are, slimy and black and rotting and breaking, a lot of the time too, what we find in the greenhouse is bugs. are chomping at the roots. You'd never see that if you didn't unpot it. You know, you just see that the leaves are kind of going crispy or folding under, or and you just kind of go, wow, I'm not really sure what's going on. But don't hesitate to look down near where the trunk meets the soil, or the stem meets the soil as well, because a lot of the time you can potentially see issues there. And for us, there's a lot of disease issues that we find near the crown or the base of the plant. And anyway, it's just another way to diagnose what problems you may have. And of course, if the roots are in a really bad shape, why throw the plant out? There's no sense in
replanting it.
Yeah, and especially replanting the same variety in that same spot. That would just be insanity.
So I might talk to him and be like, well, let's try a different plant.
Yep.
Because he's only had it in there for a little while, so it might still be in the shape of a pot. Like the roots, who knows how they planted it, and they didn't do a proper planting. Which that could be another one, is human error. Like a huge problem with trees is they get planted too deep. My neighbor, he has everything is barely planted, and he had a maple in his front yard. I think it was like a red maple cross or something, and it just is totally dead. It's totally dead. Mm-hmm. And everyone else's maples are like coming out, they're leafing out and they're looking really good. He's like, what's wrong with my plant? And the first thing I noticed was, because I planted it in the grass. So I'm like, well, that's kind of an issue. And the second thing I noticed was it was planted way too deep. I couldn't see the root flare, and I couldn't even find it. I didn't have any tools or anything. I didn't try to dig it up, but I was just like, this sucker's planted too deep. I could already tell.
Yeah.
And who knows? And then he's watering it as grass, so it's probably getting too much. It was probably not getting the right uptake. And our winter was really warm, and I think it actually can hurt plants that are used to more of a cold season, because it never really got super cold.
Yeah. And then the plant doesn't go into its full dormancy.
Yeah. Or it goes in and out of dormancy,
mm-hmm.
and things start moving, and then it gets cold a little bit and shuts down.
Plumbing starts to become active, and then it shuts it down, and it becomes active and shuts down and breaks cells.
And we can't do anything about that. That's just a cycle that happens.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but number 4 is
human error.
Okay.
So there's certain things that we can do better as gardeners and planter people, arborists and landscapers, and one is knowing how to properly install things. And a lot of people just think it's digging a hole and putting it in. Yeah. I met with my friend, and she works at the U, and she was interviewing people, and she didn't give me any details of who it was or whatever, but I guess he was he walked in thinking, just give me the job, and she just straight up asked him, how do you plant a tree? And he couldn't quite give the proper answers. Like, it doesn't mean that he doesn't know how to do it, he just didn't know how to formulate it. But there's certain things that you don't want to do. You don't want to make the hole the same size as the pot. You want to make it about 2 to 3 times bigger than the pot.
Mm-hmm.
You want to angle the sides down. Simple things like that he couldn't answer. And one of the biggest problems with trees is they just get planted too deep, straight up.
Yep.
I had to dig out trees all the time that people would come in. The U contracted with them to take care of the planting. We didn't do the planting, which I thought was a mistake. But they'd come in. It would probably because it would cost a lot more for us to do it, but we do it the right way.
That's right.
And trees can handle at least a year of not being alive and looking okay. So anyway, I had to dig out trees all the time to find those root flares. I think that was the